Well, good day and welcome to this HESS webinar with our friends from Doctums. My name is Keith Folks. I'm Executive Director and founder of the HESS Consortium, and so glad to see everyone today. We've got some good friends here. Josh Dietrich has been a wonderful partner of ours. Previously, you may know him from Lucian, but now he is with Doctums as the Vice President for coaching, I believe, executive coaching and leadership. So very excited about having Josh. Josh and I were reminiscing about the days that I put him on the spot at the HESS conference. Him and the other executives from the other ERP companies put him on the spot and asked him a bunch of questions on the stage and made him sweat. So no sweating today, right, Josh?
That's right.
That's good. Excellent. And we've got some other good friends here with Linda and Bob and Kerri, wonderful folks, and we're just very, very glad to see them. So Josh, I'm going to turn it over to you for introductions and to start it off.
Great. Thank you, Keith. Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're located. Thanks for joining us today. As Keith mentioned, I spent 3 decades working for Lucian, leading both engineering and product management teams before launching my own executive coaching practice about 2.5 years ago, and recently joined Doctums as their Vice President of Coaching Services. And today I'm joined by Kerri Chapman, Bob Wisler, and Dr. Linda Wu, and I'll let each of them introduce themselves in a moment, to share some thoughts with you about how we can make the CIO role and the IT function on campus more strategic, and ways that coaching can support that. Before I do that, a practice I love with any kind of a webinar like this is just to take a moment and ask each of you to connect in with your care about today. What is it that brings you to this conversation? And what do you want to bring home from it? And I encourage you just to take a moment and think about that. And as we get to those points that resonate deeply with you, let that deepen your appreciation of today. I'll also be keeping an eye on the chat. If you have questions that arise as we are talking, we'll look and see if we have time and an opportunity to pull some of those in as well. I'll share my info in the chat now and again at the end if you want to reach out to me. And let's start things off. So I'd like to have each of you introduce yourself, share your role and your prior institution history. Bob, let's start with you.
Well, great. Thank you, Josh. Hello, everyone. I'm Bob Wisler. I'm the CIO at Aquinas College in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I've led the IT departments in different roles at 5 different institutions, including a community college, a mid-sized public university, and 3 private colleges over the last 27 years. It's great to be here today.
Thank you. Kerri?
Hi, everyone. I'm Kerri Chapman. I am the Deputy CIO at Washington and Lee University. I have been here for almost 8 years. Before that, I spent about 12 years at the University of Richmond in a variety of roles, both in IT, and then I took a little side sabbatical, I call it, to advancement, where I was the Director of Advancement Services. But I've spent my entire 25-year career in higher education, started out actually in enrollment management, admissions, and financial aid, before finally making my way to my home in IT.
Wonderful. And Linda?
Hi, everybody. My name is Linda Wu, and I have spent close to 30 years in higher education. My last role in higher ed was the CIO of Howard Community College, which I spent 24 years there in different capacities in leadership of IT. I am now actually in private sector. I moved over to private sector. I am a VP of CIO over IT in an organization. I also started my own consulting firm. And the reason I did that is because my goal is, president one day of a college, I wanted to kind of spread my wings and be able to see the different side, the opposite side of higher ed and what private sector has to offer. And today I'm going to share a little bit about strategic thinking in those sectors as well, compared to my higher ed experience. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thanks, Linda. So we've got a diverse group with us today with an interesting background, both in higher ed and other spaces. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. So the first question, and Kerri, let's start with you. How have you seen the role of IT shift at your institution? And what have you and your IT colleagues done to shape that shift?
Yeah, so I think there's just really in the last decade, I've seen a much broader understanding among our board members in matters of cybersecurity, data governance, enterprise systems, and just really how all that ties to the student and faculty experience. And they realize now that IT sits right in the middle of all that. We're in the middle of those conversations every day. And we also tend to know how to project manage. So there's sort of this dual benefit. And in our specific instance, we used to report up to the provost. We now report up to the vice president of finance. My boss's title used to be chief technical officer. He's now chief information officer. We have a dedicated chief information security officer, which did not exist 8 years ago. So I think, we've realized we can't sit in a basement anymore, not to pigeonhole IT to being, relegated to a basement, but we really have to get out on campus. And as we started, so Washington and Lee went through an ERP transformation project over the last 4 years. I'm sure several of you have either done that or entertaining it now. And as we began that project to actually convert to Workday, we found we've just got to be more visible and available to listen to how that student experience is impacted by the technology. Specifically to my team, it was really technical when I arrived. And since in the last probably 3 or 4 years, we've added business analysts, information architects who really kind of blur the functional and technical lines. So it's really been a dramatic shift that I've seen.
I love that. I know in my experience, both working with you and some of your colleagues, that you do have a really strong relationship with other members of the campus outside of IT, and that willingness, as you said, to get out of the basement and reach out was certainly a key part, I think, that has helped strengthen IT at your organization.
Definitely.
Bob, how about you?
Oh, yeah, I think first of all, you've got to make sure that IT is functioning at an exceptional level. If it's broken or perceived to not be doing a great job, I think you're going to fail to impact the rest of the institution. We're all suffering with shrinking budgets, enrollments, and I think it starts with operational before it can be strategic. And so if you could help the college save time and money, I think your colleagues then start running to you to help. And then that allows you to have the bigger conversations where you can really impact the institution.
Yeah, I think you're probably being a little bit humble. I know in my time working with you that at your last institution, you had some early wins that had a major impact. And then when I did a 360 feedback interview with some of your colleagues, the thing I heard most often was, Bob seems to always get what he wants, and it kind of pisses us off. And I know it was in large part because you had a proven track record of success in getting some early wins with IT that then people trusted you when you asked for the next thing and the next thing. Linda, how about you?
Sure. I think what's shifted is that we've gone from being support to needing to lead. So much of what we do today depends on technology. And if we're not there in the decision-making process, it has been failures, right? People have bought things that doesn't integrate, that we have to tell them, sorry, we can't do this because it doesn't fit. So what I've seen over the years is being part of that conversation, getting to the table is vitally important. So IT at Howard is part of what we call the president's team. And on that team, we talk about a lot of things that are very strategic. And I've gotten them to the point where looking at IT to answer that question of, should we do this? What do we need to think about we're not thinking about? That's the shift, right? Instead of saying, okay, you're going to do this. This is what we need. It's more of, this is what we want to do. How do we do it? Right. And so leading that conversation has been a big shift. And I think building the partnership across campus that my staff and I have done has been critical, very much to Kerri's point. If you don't talk to people and people don't have trust in you and they don't see what value you bring, they're not gonna think that you know what you're doing, right? So it's building that partnership, having the business analysts out there, meeting with the users on a regular basis so they understand what you need to do and you understand what they need to do. And so it becomes what I call a partnership across the organization, so that when it comes to time to make a decision, they know you have their best interest at heart.
Love that. I noticed that both you and Kerri hit on this shift to really having business analysts and recognizing the need for a more functional role in partnership with the other areas of the institution in a way that, 20 years ago, we didn't see a whole lot of in the IT space. Yeah. Bob, let's start with you on this next question. How have you evolved your role at the institution to become more strategic?
I think it's by really making sure you're not seen as just the IT person. I think like what Linda had said, I also sit on the president's cabinet, and when your peers see you as the problem solver, and that the business of higher ed, and that goes from financial aid to physical plant to groundskeeping, wherever it is, that you're bringing a different perspective, and it allows us to help people think about the solutions that they need to be thinking about. And so many times I introduce myself and say, now I'm not a normal IT person. And so, I earned these gray hairs. And so you've seen a few things in higher ed. So it's really making sure that people understand that, you don't pigeonhole yourself is really what I'm saying.
Yeah. I love that you shared that. It brings back some of my own experience, as I spent most of my career in software development, leading engineering teams, and starting at DataTel. And when I became the head of engineering for DataTel, suddenly I was on the executive team for the first time in my life. My colleagues were not technical engineering people, and that was a big shift for me. And I, frequently mentored people and often bring this up in coaching, that you need to always think like your boss, right? And if you can tap into your boss's role and what your boss sees as important and the other members around campus, you'll have a much greater empathy and a much greater awareness to solve bigger problems like you suggested. Yeah. Linda, how about you?
So I think the biggest thing is going from a participant to a leader, right? So in those conversations, like Bob was saying, you got to bring things to the table to lead that conversation. Don't just be part of it. So we probably know, and Bob, you probably think this too, we probably know the business of the college better than any of the other executive members on that team, because we have to. We support all of the areas, right? And so, EDUCAUSE was a big thing for me, because every year they come out with the top 10. So with those top 10, those are conversation starters, making sure that we're thinking about those ideas. What are some things that are coming down the pike? And so leading those conversations, I think, is critical to the strategy of the college, right? And knowing where we need to go, where we are today and where we need to go. And I'll share, in the company that I work for today, one of the reasons I was hired was to come in and kind of really evaluate IT and where they need to be. They weren't strategic partners. They were really a support in today's world. And I hate to say, but it's a technology company. So you would think technology is strategic. It is not. And when I came in, I was like, wow, the work I had to do the time I've been there is really to bring IT into that strategic conversation. I literally had a conversation yesterday about IT strategy. They hadn't even thought about it. The company has no IT strategy. And that's, I think, what I brought to that table is being able to talk about what the future of IT looks like, and whether it's higher ed, whether it's private, where do we need to bring the company internally in order to support our clients or our students. And that's sometimes I remember sitting in the executive sessions and we would talk about strategy. We didn't always talk about the student, right? Although that is our mission, we didn't always think about the student. We thought about processes and what are we going to do? But when it comes to strategy, we got to always keep that in mind. And so I think, being able to lead that conversation, keeping who our users are, who are the people we're here for? What's the mission of the college in mind when we're thinking about strategy really made it key to being able to bring the things that we needed to bring to the table. But because it was connected with our mission, people started to listen. And when you start to lead that conversation, a lot of the decisions actually become easier because they know why we're doing it.
Love that. Kerri, how about you?
Yeah, Linda, what you just said really resonates with me. I think some of the transformation here started before I came. My role was originally Director of Enterprise Applications. When I was hired, we were shifting to a best of breed application and systems approach. And so the title became Director of Enterprise Systems and Integration Services. So it really put more focus on how everything was interconnected. And then when we really were approaching this critical point with our ERP, that's really where the shift took off. And it was really part of my role to work with our administrative office leadership to understand the challenges that they were facing with the legacy system, communicating the increasing support burden that it was causing upon not just my team, but also the administrative offices on campus, and the experience for the student too. I mean, all wrapped into that. And so what's interesting though is although there was this sort of strategic shift for my role, when the Workday implementation started, I was pulled way down into the weeds. I really had trouble coming out of that once we were live to think about future direction, and I was really overwhelmed. So part of what led me to Josh was to say, okay, how do I get out of the weeds and out of the daily monitoring? Because I was the integrations lead, I was the overall technical lead, I was the testing lead for the project. And I was in it from everything from contract close to implementation partner management to post-production support. So how could I continue to kind of rise up to that 50,000 foot level when I was still so mired in details? So as we did get post-project, which are we really ever post-project, but post the main push, my title was changed to Deputy CIO. And I know titles aren't everything, but I do think it was a key part of the rebrand of my group, so that it really would position me to be able to think more strategically and to advocate to have the right people in the right positions on my team. So
I love that you shared when you reached out, it struck me because of all of the people I've worked with, you were one of the most thoughtful people going into the coaching relationship. Your initial outreach, you'd spent a lot of time thinking about how you wanted to shift out of the weeds being post Workday. And you had a pretty good list before we even started talking about the areas you knew you wanted to focus on, which is something I would share with anybody to think about. If you're looking to explore working with a coach or a mentor, think about what are the things that you really want to focus on to learn and grow. I often get, people who are sort of voluntold to work with a coach, and they may be less interested and less thoughtful about where they want to work, but the ones who know where they want to get to and understand the power of a coach have been some of the most rewarding conversations. I'll remind you, if anything that you're hearing strikes a chord, you'd like to dig deeper, feel free to put a comment or a question in the chat. Linda, let's start with you on this next one. So each of you have had experience working with an executive coach, perhaps multiple experiences. What are some of the ways that coaching has contributed to your growth?
Tremendously. So when I became CIO, I was the director of what we call administrative information systems, which was the enterprise system. And when I became CIO, I went from a colleague to a boss, and that's hard. And I reached out to Josh and I was like, I need your help. I need your help to think through and coach my team, not only me, but my team. So I brought Josh in to coach my entire team. And that I thought really was tremendously eye-opening. And I don't want to answer the next question before we get there, but that's one of the eye-opening that I'll share that in the next question. But it really, we've never been coached before, not individually, not as a team. And what I did was I had Josh coached each of them individually, and then we coached us as a team. And that really helped us gel together, build trust, understand each other better. We did lots of different activities. I think we went for about a year and a half with coaching. The 360s were very helpful. All the things that Josh did with us really got us to rethink who we were as a team, and allowed me to become better positioned to be their boss, because it's really hard to go from colleague to boss. People are used to you. There's a lot of baggage there. They're used to you doing things a certain way. They're used to going we had a Starbucks on campus, so we'd go down and have coffee in the morning and shoot the breeze before we get started. But then when you became the boss, there were things that you had to get them to do that they're not used to hearing from you. They're not used to your direction. And my previous boss, who was a CIO, we're very different people. We think differently. We act on things differently. And so that also was a shift for my team. And so having Josh come and help us kind of guide us through that shift was tremendously helpful. And I think what it did was it really accelerated our team to get to where we needed to be much faster than we could have had we done it on our own. And I think Josh should be very proud. He coached all of my team, and several of my team members have left the organization, similar to myself. We now have a new CIO of a community college. We have one of my team took over my position as a CIO, and we have a CISO. So of the 5 team members that Josh coached, 3 became C-level. I guess if you count myself, 4 are at C-level positions, and 1 retired. But he could have been if that was in his plans, but he was at the end of his career. So that helped them, because he was their executive coach as well, helped them get to their next level there where they wanted to be in their career. So thank you to Josh, and coaching really made a big difference for us.
Well, and thank you, Linda, for the opportunity to work with your team. It was certainly a rewarding experience, and you don't usually get to go that deep with a full team in a coaching. Typically, we would, normally I would have had one coach work with you and a different coach work with the direct reports. But it was an eye-opening experience for all of us, and I'm thrilled to see how your team has gone on to grow from that experience.
Can I just add one more thing
Sure.
that I totally forgot? Not only did Josh coach my team, Josh actually coached some of the cabinet members. And I totally, just now when you said that, and they have also tremendously grown in their own career paths as well under Josh's coaching. And he did exercises with the cabinet itself. So that really helped us gel as a cabinet, not only my team, but the cabinet itself. So it's very effective.
Thanks. Kerri, how about you?
Yeah, so similar to Linda, we did actually, Josh came in and did an everything DISC workshop with all of ITS, which has been really helpful. And I'm sure Josh can share more information about the details of that type of evaluation. But we've even had, since that evaluation, we've had some new staff members come in. We've also had them take the DISC evaluation. So that's been really helpful. But for me personally, leadership circle, the 360 evaluation, I'd never had that done before. It really validated some of my feelings about needing to let go of the death grip I had on certain things. And then I had team members who were perfectly capable of handling all of that on their own. They did not need me to sit there and hold their hand. It really helped me build some muscle memory around tools I already had at my disposal. So one example is practicing difficult conversations in a safe space, and working on something that I'll credit to Josh calling productive conflict, right? So having something come out of what could be a very tense situation. So being able to do that, and then similar to Linda too, working through some new leadership challenges. Like I didn't go from colleague to boss, but I, for the first time in my career, had direct reports with direct reports. And so we're a pretty small IT organization. And so how do I manage coaching those, or coaching my direct reports to help manage their direct reports? And then another big thing was really just managing up, thinking like my boss, and not always deferring to him. I will be the first one to say I have the best boss on the planet. I know there are probably other people who would argue with me that their boss is better, but I love my boss. I have an amazing relationship with him. But being able to really take and make decisions on my own, as opposed to waiting for him to react or answer a question. So Josh really helped me work through all of those particular challenges, and I feel a lot more confident in those areas now because of it.
Well, you shared the moving from managing individual contributors to managing managers. I remember those conversations, and that I remember it inspired one of my blog posts, as coaching conversations often do. You knew I wrote that one for you, where I wrote a post specifically on the differences between managing people who manage other people, right? You mentioned DISC. If you're not familiar with the DISC assessment, it's a tool that basically assesses your interpersonal and communication style. And it's something that I use in every coaching engagement. But also, as Linda mentioned, we did that with the cabinet at her team, and it can be a great team building engagement. We did that with Kerri's organization as well. The reason why it's so crucial is we talked about this need to build relationships across campus. And I don't think I've had a coaching relationship that hasn't involved coaching conversations about, I'm struggling to connect with this person. I don't know why I can't get along with this person. And understanding your communication style, your natural style, and being able to get a read on what that other person's style may be and how that may differ from your style becomes a really important element for us in the coaching conversations to figure out different ways to approach them. So, Bob, how about you?
Well, first of all, don't wait as long as I did to get an executive coach. I wish I would have had one in my 30s and 40s. I really think that I'm very happy with my career, but I think it would have had a different trajectory. And so for those of you who think that I still have time, I would say don't wait. The first thing that I really gained from Josh as he worked with myself and my team, we definitely had a interesting and difficult team to work with, but it was understanding that the weaknesses that I thought that I had, that other people didn't perceive the weaknesses like I did. And I think some of those things were really holding me back. And it was a negative in my career. And so being able to understand what those were and how others perceived them then allowed me to then think about the strengths. And that's really one of the there's not just two takeaways, there's could be a dozen, but identifying those strengths that I assumed that everybody possessed. And Josh mentioned it earlier, but identifying your superpowers. And it gave me additional insight of why things were going right, and then how to capitalize on those strengths even more.
Yeah, I'd like to just sort of double click on that statement. If you have the opportunity to get 360 feedback in any form, or feedback of any kind, I cannot stress enough how important it is to go into that exercise first looking for your strengths and your superpowers. My experience is it's human nature. We immediately look for the negative feedback. What can I change? What's my weakness? How can I improve that? And there's certainly learning to be had there. But I find there's much greater learning in recognizing, oh, this is something I'm really good at that I might take for granted that the people around me don't feel like they're as good at that as I am. And if you can unlock those and really leverage those effectively, that's when the magic really happens. Yeah. Okay. So can I get each of you to share one of your favorite coaching moments? Kerri, let's start with you.
There's so many. I had a list. I maintained a list of Josh epiphanies as I was going through coaching. But one of them was really it was I was revisiting some resentment that I actually harbored, and there are a lot of sayings about resentment, but there was it was Josh just really kind of helped talk me through the situation, and I discovered that it was not focused in the right place, and I realized that it was actually a conversation I needed to have with my boss. And in all that time, I didn't really think that that was where it needed to be. And it was really my first productive conflict conversation. And one of the things we came to realize was that we were both, like I mentioned, adore him. We were both on the same page so frequently that we didn't know how to interact when we disagreed with each other, which was just like complete mind blow for me. So now we have much richer conversations as a result of that. And I'm just enormously grateful that we were able to take the conversation in that direction.
Yeah, I remember that conversation well. It triggers two thoughts for me. One, as you mentioned, that led to the discovery of what we call a missing conversation.
Right.
Right. And I, bring this up often in coaching. And you think about any relationship that you have, whether it's a professional relationship, your relationship with your partner, your children. If it's an important relationship, I guarantee you there's at least one missing conversation in that relationship, probably a bunch. And the more aware we become of, oh, wow, this is really a conversation I should be having that I'm just not having, and start to have the courage to lean into some of those conversations, the more that we unlock, right? The other thing that you touched on that comes up all the time in coaching conversations is I get the gift of helping people shift their perspective, right? Matter of fact, I had a conversation I was dreading recently, and I was talking to my friend who's a coach, and she shifted my perspective, and she pointed out, well, you're assuming this other person believes X, Y, and Z, but they might not know that. They could be coming into this completely blind without that background. You just think that's what they are assuming. And that perspective really helped, and that perspective was accurate. The conversation went remarkably well, much better than I thought, and it's because my assumptions were wrong. So any kind of a confidential thought partner, coach, mentor can be a great avenue to get some of that, insight and shift that perspective. Bob, how about you?
Well, and Josh didn't put me up to this, but one of my favorite coaching moments involves someone that Josh was coaching at the organization, someone outside of IT. So it would have been a peer in the organization. And this person was really struggling to understand her worth to the organization. And she was working on, negotiating a higher role and a higher salary. And she just really had been underestimating her skills and, just had a lack of confidence when she was, preparing for that negotiation. And so, Josh obviously had the relationship, but I was kind of doing some behind the scenes coaching. And so it was kind of a tag team. And so, I was just really thrilled to hear the results of her time that she spent with Josh. And, when she did her negotiations, she said, I just pretended to be Bob and I got everything that I asked for. And so, and she would not have been able to do that without the confidence that, Josh also helped her achieve. And so that was a fun thing to hear.
Yeah, I love that story. I actually heard from that woman just this morning as we continued to work together on an on and off basis. And I could go down a rabbit hole with a little neuroscience lecture about the value of channeling, I'm just going to be like Bob, and channeling that, because we're actually changing how our brain predicts. And when we do that, but I'll save that for another day. Linda?
So, yeah, as you had mentioned about DISC assessment, you did the DISC assessment with us, and it was my aha moment of seeing the results of my team and how I am very different than my team. And one of my team members who was really, it was like dragging him, kicking and screaming to the coaching table. He didn't want to coach because he was retiring. He knew he was retiring. He didn't want to do it. And when we did the DISC assessment, his came out to be a D. And so he was all proud of himself. He continued to say, I'm a big D. And that would be his response to everything. And I was like, okay, you may want to do this. And for everybody, I'm an SI, so I'm a very big people person. I think about others first. A lot of times I think about the situation. So I'm always talking to him about, hey, what about how this is going to reflect? So when you bring in that kind of SI aspect of it, he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. But why I bring this up is throughout the time that we've had with Josh, he probably gained so much, and he won't admit it, but he actually gained so much from coaching and knowing that he was a D on the spectrum and I was an SI, and how our interaction changed for the better because of knowing how we worked and why I wanted a certain thing a certain way, but me knowing that this is how he's going to, because he's a big D, reminding me every day I'm a big D. And how he was going to resolve things. And it was really an aha moment of how do I interact with him differently instead of getting frustrated. I used his strengths and I put him on projects I knew would also benefit him. And it really brought us a lot of wins when we started to do that. And so I think there's so many favorite coaching moments. I think it's like, I can't wait to see Josh every time I see him. But it really, I think that one really speaks to the value of what Josh brought us, is to open our eyes, not only to ourselves, but to our coworkers and others, in how we work and how we could build that stronger team, because we knew how each of us functioned and what was important to us.
I love that you brought that individual up. The two things I loved about his journey, one was, he recognized over time that he wasn't the best face of the organization, right? So there were several points as we got through the coaching where he realized, oh, I'm going to delegate participation in this user meeting to this other person, who is now a CIO, as you mentioned, because she's going to be much more diplomatic than I'm going to be as a big D. And I loved seeing that learning. And then the other thing I loved when it came time for testimonials is, his phrase, and I'm sure you remember this, he would say, when people talk about this kindler, gentler version of me, I tell them it's the Josh effect. I love that quote. Well, thanks for sharing those stories. Last question, and then I've got some other questions we might dig into if nothing comes in from the group. We'll start with you, Bob. What advice do you have for IT leaders who are looking to become more strategic?
And I said a little bit earlier, I think you have to make sure that your operations are great, because if, you got to start in your own home, right? I think that the other thing is to really not focus on just the systems that you're responsible for. The ERP is just, it's in your back pocket and you're supposed to make that work, right? But look for opportunities outside of your normal portfolio. For example, the IT department here just took over the college mailroom. How many mailrooms report through the IT organization? And so they've been doing the same thing for 30 years, literally. And to be able to go in and completely overhaul that and automate it, get Amazon boxes on campus, it's going to have a huge impact on the students. And so by going outside of the portfolio, it will allow other people to think of you in a way that, wow, this person might be able to help lead an initiative that I want to lead that they may not feel comfortable in doing. And so definitely look outside of your normal portfolio to make a difference.
Kerri?
Yeah, so there's kind of two big things for me, and they're both Joshisms. One is what got you here won't keep you here. And so especially for me, when I think about what a productive day used to look like when I was down in the weeds, a productive day strategically looks a lot different than your previous productive days. I mean, last week I had a day where I was not at my desk for even an hour because I went over to the dining hall to eat and I ran into some people, and then I walked through town, and we are in a very small town in Lexington, Virginia. And so I was able to stop and chat with some colleagues, and then there was an after work reception. And so I had some incredible conversations there that just wouldn't have happened. So thinking differently about what a productive day looks like, it doesn't necessarily mean I am in my seat at my desk all the time. And then the second thing is, and this is another kind of epiphany for me, was ignorance is bliss. So if I look for those moments where I can successfully delegate something, and there's future opportunities for excellence and learning from failures or mistakes, or there's a great success that we've had, just sort of take a moment and revel in the fact that, maybe I was a little ignorant about the details, and that's okay. Like, where I have to continue to practice that is my instinct is to dive in and try to fix and try to be very, very responsive. And I don't know that that's always going to serve you well in a leadership position in IT. Yes, you should still be responsive, but I do think you end up owning more than you should. And then it sort of erodes the trust with your team to get those things done. So, and then another just sidebar is always approach from a place of curiosity. And so that's, I think, one of the hallmarks of an IT organization. I think it speaks to what Bob just said about, looking outside of your portfolio. You can be curious about a lot of things on campus. And again, I think we sit kind of in that position where we have sort of tentacles into a lot of different things and can offer really fresh takes on long-standing problems or issues or questions.
I love all of that. I want to put an exclamation point on that last statement about curiosity. It's one of the greatest gifts for me in switching to coaching, because to be an effective coach, you have to be really curious. And I have found that I'm now curious in pretty much every aspect of life, and it makes every aspect of life more entertaining. So definitely be curious. Linda?
Yeah, so I would say what's been very helpful for me as I grew in my strategic role is partnering and building trust. We need to partner across the organization, outside the organization, and in building that partnership, you have to build trust. People have to trust you. I don't know how many of you have heard it's IT's fault. We used to hear that on a daily basis. It's IT's problem. IT did this. It's because of IT. And I took that in strides. We get that every day. But the question then becomes, okay, I take it, it's IT, we're involved in it, but I don't think we're alone in it. So let's work together to resolve and get to the root of the problem. And when you do that and you bring people to the table and you're talking to them and they feel like they're involved in the decision, they're involved in the troubleshooting, and they're a partner with you. So you're not pushing blame, you accept the blame, you don't push the blame. Eventually the blame game changes. It becomes, we think we're having a problem. Can you help us resolve it? Instead of it's your problem, and that's the shift that I saw throughout my career at Howard, because I was there a long time. It went from, this is your problem, you need to resolve it, to, hey, I think we have a problem. Can you help us? Let's figure it out. And I think when you partner and you build that trust across the organization, things fall in place and you become automatically someone who they look to bounce ideas off of, and start to think, okay, what's the next big thing? And so they come to you now for, you know what, we have this enrollment problem. What do you think about? What are things out there that we can potentially do? So not only are you helping resolve the problem that is the system caused, because of bad data. No, I'm just kidding. But immediate problem, but you're also now partnering with them to resolve a problem in their area that maybe technology can help them do. Automation, AI, all the things that we have cite over that we know what's in our toolbox to be able to help them. And it really became, hey, Linda, what can you do for us? Is there something? Can we talk about this? And we had great conversations. And that's really what helped me get to the CIO role, is that I started having these conversations across the board so that when it came time to interview, it actually was pretty easy. I'm not saying the whole process was easy, but just it became easy because I knew the college. I knew strategically what we needed to do because I had been part of so many of those conversations. So.
Thanks, Linda.
Mhm.
I'm going to offer my own answer to this question as well, which I hadn't planned to do, but I just want to share it. So many of us growing up in technical roles, we tend to lean a little to the left hemisphere of our brain. That if you've heard the myth that people are either left-brained or right-brained, that's not true. You're using both hemispheres of your brain all the time. But we can lean a little towards the left or a little towards the right. When we're leaning towards the left, we tend to be more focused on the details. We can be more rigid. We can be, executors. So when you want to be more strategic, we need to activate the right hemisphere of our brain. And one way we do that is with metaphor. And probably all three of you have heard me say, you need to get up in the balcony. It's one of my favorite statements. And when I want to be more strategic, I say that to myself, and I literally visualize myself up in the balcony, looking down over the orchestra, getting that big picture view. And I will actually go to that window right there. It's not really too high up in the balcony, but I'm not on the first floor, and look down, because that perspective of looking down from a top-down view helps to open up and activate the right hemisphere and more strategic thinking. So use that as a simple practice to remind yourself, okay, I'm going to pull myself out of the weeds. I'm going to get up at the balcony. I'm going to shift my perspective and use movement, change your physical location, maybe go for a walk, anything that helps you embody a different perspective and mindset to open things up. It's one of the reasons why I put this giant whiteboard on my wall. Is once we all moved home for COVID, I realized I needed a big whiteboard space that allowed me to organize my thoughts and think differently than just living up here in my head all the time. So if there's any questions from the audience, feel free to throw them in the chat. I know we only have a couple of minutes left. Is there anything any of you want to add that I haven't already asked?
Don't be shy to come off of mute and ask your questions. This is a good time for us all to learn together. If you have maybe some comments that might help the group that's related to leadership and what's helped you in the past, please share.
So I think I'd like to share that whether it's Josh or another coach, they're your sounding board. It's somebody who definitely keeps things confidential. So it's a person that you can talk to. And I'm sure you've heard the term or the saying, the road to the top gets lonelier and lonelier, or, being at the top, it's lonely. It is lonely because there are a lot of things you can't talk to people about, especially when it comes to, personnel issues. Your coach is someone that definitely can noodle that with you. I've done that a lot of times with Josh, and it was just, hey, I need you to walk through this with me. Am I thinking about it right? And I think that's the power of having a coach, is someone that's in your corner, who is willing to help you walk through, but then may have a different perspective. He's opened my eyes to certain things because I was dead set on it this way. And then he asked me a couple of questions. I went, I didn't think of it that way. And that's that power of coaching. I think that it's important for a leader.
Thanks, Linda. Benjamin, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, sorry, casual Friday today.
Good.
And we're up in Duluth, Minnesota, so still a couple feet of snow. I'm just kidding. It's actually quite very, very pleasant right now. But anyway, I've been here 2 years in the CIO role, and I kind of came up similar to Kerri. It looks like really in the I was a developer, way in the weeds with Oracle, SQL, enterprise, every CIS and ERP, they all suck under the radar, and now we're deep diving into heavy integrations and API management. And I find my role, I'm fortunate enough to serve on cabinet, and it's a lot of this, as you described, Josh, kind of like looking down and metaphors and acting and trying to relate to people. I'm finding myself in a situation where we're having to bring some order to overall operations, and maybe one way to simplify it would say like perfect example of organizational maintenance, where willy-nilly changes to departments or things like that had a very impactful downstream effect aren't governed anywhere else. So not only the project, it made sense when somebody said, we end up being the best project managers. Well, we also seem to be tied to the only people that say this has to go into a budget cycle, and it's all these things that are not IT, and we're extending further and further into the business. And I don't know if this is a commonality that you are all seeing as well, even to the extent of taking on documentation institutionally. But I think maybe my question is, we're not IT anymore. Should we change our name? And is this normal?
Well, I mean, I'm seeing it sort of at the executive level more in higher ed, a shift towards a VP of operations or strategic analysis, somebody who is sort of overseeing that, right? And I don't know how many IT organizations out there report up to that role. I mean, I don't have a sense of that across the landscape, but I am seeing that a little bit more. And I think the change, like I said, with our organization from a chief technology officer to a chief information officer, really represented sort of that more broad sort of data governance piece that was never, that really wasn't under us. So I don't know that I have a clear answer for you, other than it feels like some organizations are shifting, at least at the C level, to have somebody to help herd those cats.
Yeah, in the absence of maybe like a administrative operations officer, it seems like we're assuming that role. And even to the extent that I'm trying to limit maybe the service offerings we have, so we don't extend ourselves too far in one direction or something like that. So thank you.
Yeah, I would just offer, think about what it is you want.
Yeah.
Right. Do you want to start accumulating functions like that? And do you want to rebrand your organization? And then be deliberate about how you proceed down that path to shape it and support it in that direction. And it's a great coaching conversation for sure.
Sure. Or more importantly, what our IT leadership wants, because it's not about me. Shouldn't be about me.
That's right. That's right. And I've seen, Ben, I've seen so many campuses with so many different models. I've seen some where the CIO is actually in charge of grounds, and some are actually in charge of, some are COOs, chief operating officers. And it seems that private schools are beginning to collapse those roles down to one person as opposed to multiple. That may be because of budget, and it also has to do with how much they trust that person and how strategic or overall, do they have a big picture in mind, right?
Right.
So that's for sure. But I've seen it all over the place. It sounds like you're you're involved in something like that too. So
Well, I think we're all involved in some kind of redefinition of roles, especially post-COVID.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Anyone else? We're at the top of the hour. This has been a great session, Michelle. Thank you for your comment. Josh, this has been wonderful, absolutely wonderful, and I cannot thank you enough for sharing with us. Bob, Linda, Kerri, wonderful job. Thank you so much for giving us so much wisdom, and we need that. We need that today. And thank you all for being a part of this webinar. We really appreciate our HESS members participating and asking questions and getting involved. So thank you so much. Josh, any last words?
Just thanks to the panel. Keith, thanks for having us. If any of this intrigued you, you want to talk more about coaching, my information's in the chat. Connect with me on LinkedIn and happy to explore it further.
Outstanding. Thank you all for being here and have a great day. And
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.